Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Rise to Your Peak podcast. I am here today with my guest, Austin Stout, who honestly needs no introduction. But for those of you who may not be familiar with Austin, um, Austin is a renowned coach in the fitness industry and functional medicine industry. He's one of the few who really has mastered both sides of the coin with both with bodybuilding and fitness, but also health optimization and functional health. He's had one of the most successful and longest standing coaching mentorships, which is still cranking out there. Not only has he been on the forefront of, you know, uh, improving the industry, but he's also helping as many other coaches gain the knowledge and experience they need to make the changes we want to see in the industry and always, be at the top of our games. Austin, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing good, man. I appreciate you having me on. We actually scheduled this a while ago, and I checked with you this morning because we haven't like spoke a word of it. It's like,
I
hey,
know.
just want to make sure. But yeah, we are here and we are ready.
Yeah, we're both pretty busy people, so it's kind of just like, if we lock something in, we're sticking to it, you
Rock
know?
and roll. Yeah, dude. Absolutely.
Obviously we have a lot in common, but at the same time, we encounter different walks of life between myself at the clinic and my coaching team, and then your coaching team, but also the fact that you work with so many different coaches who likely bring you so many different cases. Um, so kind of the first thing that I wanted to chat about was like recent things that you've noticed in your experience coming about that maybe wasn't happening or wasn't being talked about so much 1 or 2 years
Sure.
ago.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a great question. So I'm gonna take this in like maybe a slightly different direction
sure.
than you, and maybe you expect this, maybe not, but I think that the I like you said, I have a pretty unique perspective and position in the industry because I have all my own clients, obviously, and my not only is my demographic extremely broad, like I can get a check-in from my 300-pound IFBB pro bodybuilder, and then 5 minutes later I have my postpartum mom
Yeah.
checking in. Like that's
Yeah.
a regular day for me
Yeah.
all the time. And so of course that plus just the sheer volume of labs and GI maps and all these testing and cases and stuff and nuance that I see from all the coaches I work with, and then a lot of the like one-off consults I do. And what I really like is that the awareness around I'm starting to dislike the word functional health because it's just getting, but we're going to use it just because everyone knows what it is.
Yeah.
The awareness has grown immensely. And somebody asked me the other day, and I think I had made a post about this or was planning on it, was are we seeing more functional health issues in the industry now than we were? And the answer to that is no. The answer to that is like these things have always been there.
Right.
It's just the awareness around it has increased, which pros and cons of that. So the pro is that we're looking for it.
Yeah.
The cons are that there's still a lot of there's still a lot of gaps in application in a
Yep.
lot of areas. So we have more people offering education. There's more education out there, whether it's free or more intensive, like paying someone or courses or whatever. So there's everyone wants a piece of that pie,
Yep.
right? Now they want a piece of the pie for a couple of reasons. One is that the scope of coaching has changed immensely because
Yes.
you're probably like the amount of people that are just going to come in and prescribe macros to people and be successful long term. I mean, that's pretty much out
Yeah.
at this point. I mean, and if you're still doing that, you're you're on your way out.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, Now, with the additional awareness, if the practices aren't sound, we're also having a lot of misinformation spread. And now, actually potentially harming people more. Now, when I say harming people more, I think the intentions are good, and I think that we're not always harming people more from a physical aspect, but psychologically, there's a lot that's changing in the space,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
psychologically, we are now using more labels.
Yes.
We are now using more um, pseudo diagnosis,
Yes.
things like that. So now the clientele are looking for it. So they're coming to me or coming to someone else and they're like, I have
Already
XYZ.
diagnosed.
Right. Whether they did the,
Self-diagnosed.
yes. So they did the research on their own or they had previous coaching experiences. So like when I first started getting into this more functional health space, it was totally new. So when I would bring something up to someone about something I would see, that was just news to them.
Yeah.
Now they're just coming to me for it, right? Directly. So now we're having to break down a lot of these barriers of like things that they've already been taught or
Yeah.
things that are very ingrained in their mind.
Yeah.
There's also this kind of paralysis with these labels like I am the client that I always use. I made this up. It was a SIBO Sally. I use this, and anyone that mentors with me, they probably heard me say it. It's like you will always be SIBO Sally if you identify as SIBO Sally.
Yep.
So we're having these people that are going through, protocols over and over and over and over again. And they're, while some are successful and some aren't, they are kind of a victim to these labels. So like
Labels. Yeah.
with me, I'm now having to almost pull back a lot on the way that I approach these situations and rewire a lot of this
Yeah.
because we're getting people that have done half a dozen quote unquote protocols
Insane.
already.
Insane.
And I can't just give them that. I mean, I'm like, maybe I have some nuance in there. My
Right.
approach is slightly different, but I
Right.
mean,
More aggressive, different tactics.
and but we're largely doing something similar.
Yeah.
So we're almost having, and you saw this actually because there was kind of like, I think it was like last year, there was like some beef going on in the industry, and
Yeah.
people are like, protocols are out. We shouldn't, but I'm like, no, it's just all about understanding like when to apply,
Context.
right, 100%. But I guess my point there is we're getting to the point where the awareness has now become an issue to
Yeah.
a point. So with the mentorship and trying to educate people, a lot of what I'm doing with people is the baseline is teaching the information. Like you need to know how to read the labs. You need to know how to interpret the testing. You need to know how to implement the protocols. However, what I tell people and they ask me like, why is your service unique? And I try to tell them, I'm really trying to teach you how to think properly.
Yeah.
That is the end goal because if you can think critically and you can be a little bit more open-minded, that's where you're going to gain the most traction and get the most buy-in and have the most success with these people. So it's not just the classes. Like I have the classes. I have an education store where you can literally go in, you can purchase the class. But I
Yeah.
tell people the class does not replace
Yeah.
mentorship. The class does not replace experience. The class does
Totally.
not replace all these things. So you can't just go out and take a class on SIBO and
Right.
think that you are an expert in these situations. Because I'm going to tell you what, you're going to get these clients come in. You're like, oh, I've got all these other obstacles because they're real people with real lives, with real
Yeah.
issues. And then you're like, well, now what do I do? Or you
Right.
implement something incorrectly. So that's what I'm seeing now. I think that's a little bit different because there's so many more people in the space. So I'm having to just constantly think about how do I rewire a lot of these people's thought process so now we can navigate this new problem that we have.
Isn't it funny how like the whole kind of concept of functional medicine or alternative medicine was to move away from all the things that we hate about Western medicine, yet here we are doing the exact same things that we hate. It's like As soon as I get out, they pull me back in. Now everybody's just playing the label game and identifying with labels. And I think what you brought up is so accurate that where there was some validity of that beef was this is not a cookie cutter equation. And we can actually see cookie cutter equations the more we learn about med school and the thinking practices of physicians. There's a lot of cookie cutterness involved in that with insurance companies and like great example, majority of thyroid cases start with Synthroid. That's just like their go-to thing. So it's just like it's by the book. But like you said, teaching people to think, that's what is required to be a alternative health specialist, is deductive reasoning, thinking, listening to the whole equation, not paying attention to symptoms, and being like, what's actually going on here? And that's how you help the individual, you know?
Yeah. And it's hard.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's very difficult. So now practice, the more exposure you get, and that's why we do a lot of like case study work
Yeah.
and things like that. And I don't give anyone the answer. The case study practices, they have to do it and I critique, but I'm
Yeah.
always challenging them. I'm always like, well, what if, or let me give you an alternative perspective, so that's I think that's really where the space needs to continue to move. And that's but I'm one person.
Right.
There's other people that are talking about the stuff that I'm talking about, but still we're kind of small fish.
Yeah.
We're still a very small percentage, because like you and me and the coaches on my team and these other people in our circle, we're seeing them in our algorithm and stuff all the time. So I think the perception is that a lot of people are doing it, but dude,
Nah.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is like, we're like 1%.
Right.
It's 1% of people within this industry that's huge,
Right.
and now it's not a huge industry comparison to, like a NBA or something
Yeah.
like that, but still we're just such a small percentage in that pond. So that's why anytime I get a chance to talk to somebody that's not in my algorithm, I'm always like, yeah, let's do it, let's
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
it. But yeah, that's really where we're headed. Hopefully, I hope we
Yeah.
continue to move in that direction a little bit more. And ultimately, there's going to be ebbs and flows. So you guys listening, don't put don't think of anything absolute. Don't put too much merit in when someone says protocols are out, or when they say protocols are in, or when they start throwing these like new types of coaching
Yeah.
names. I'm like, it's everything's context always. There's
Yeah.
always going to be room to apply each of these modalities.
Right.
It's just a matter of knowing when.
Well, and I think, this is something it's always going to be around. It's not specific to just the functional space or anything, but there's always going to be that group of people who maybe they have good intentions, but they also see this opportunity to make more money or charge more money simply because they're claiming that they are a blah 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 coach or claiming that they have this experience. And that's dangerous for a couple reasons. Number one, do they actually have the skill set to help people in these very serious situations? Number two, kind of like you brought up too, are they possibly providing misinformation or creating thinking patterns that actually doesn't help that client get any further? And then as that client comes, they work their way through a couple specialists. I'm sure you run into that where it's like you're the last person. They've already worked with like five people before you. Um, and that's when you have to kind of break down what's been discussed, and kind of dig deeper.
Yeah. So you said something really important there, and we are talking about the labeling and kind of how damaging that can be, and that goes around restriction in general. So when you look at a lot of these things, like let's think of a common one of our common issues would be like a bacterial overgrowth issue. 90% of the people that are
Yeah.
walking through the door have bacterial overgrowth. Do
Right.
they require or will they benefit from some type of antimicrobial, antibiotic, something like that? The answer is probably yes. Now, where things get not, I mean, not always necessarily, but let's just say that they do. We also have to be careful with the amount of even how intensive these protocols are and the amount of restriction because now, we're having issues where I'll give you a great example. I was talking to another coach the other day about like the nutrition and different restrictions during a SIBO protocol. They're like, should we get rid of artificial sweeteners? Should we get rid of, should we go low FODMAP? Should we like do, all these things, these little extra nuance things?
Yeah.
And I, well, first and foremost, is that when you're talking about microbiome, everything changes microbiome
Right.
acutely,
Right.
right? Like everything we do all day has an alteration. So you're going to find a study or some kind of supporting evidence. And frankly, I could do a GI map right now and then eat a keto diet for 2 weeks and do another GI
It'll
map,
be
and it's going
different.
to look
Yeah.
it's going to look different. So my point here is that I'm always thinking about what happens after we're done with this because now we're creating a lot of fear
Yeah.
around things. So
Yeah.
because a lot of these people, a lot of the coaches I work with, and there's a few that work with a lot of competitors and implement functional health with competitors. So that's slightly different as far as
Sure.
restriction,
Of
because
course.
it's a lot more intensive goal. But for general population, I don't want them to be afraid to ever eat
No.
a FODMAP again, or I don't want
No.
them to be afraid to ever
Gluten,
um, eat or like drink coffee again
Yeah.
or something. You know what I mean? So when we're doing, we're implementing these protocols, I think that we also have to think about what is the path of least resistance that is going to create the best result, but also remain sustainable on
Yes.
the back end. And also within that actual protocol, when you're doing it, what's going to create the least amount of hyperfixation and the
Yes.
least amount of stress? Because
Yes.
for me, if you give me, like, I come to you for Ryze HRT and you're like, hey, I'm like, here's my GI map, hook me up with a protocol. Like, I know I need this. You say, okay, here's everything. This is best case scenario. Taking pills for me or doing something for me is just like it doesn't make any difference. But for some people that don't have much experience with a lot of these things, it's really stressful to do that. I mean, I got a big old tackle box
Right.
in my kitchen, but you got to think I've been bodybuilding for 17, 18 years and
Yeah.
it's just another day in the office. I just kind of tweak a few things, but for some people just doing that in and of itself is stressful. So maybe I have
100%.
to even reduce the intensity of the protocol. And while it might look a little bit less optimal on paper, they can stick to it. It doesn't stress them out. It's kind of, again, going on that path of least resistance. So
Yeah.
it's like 90%, being 90% 100% of the time is much better than being 100%,
For two
10% of the
weeks.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I love that you said that because I've lived everything you've talked about. Obviously, prior to Rise, most of my functional cases were correlated to competitors or like a referral from a competitor, people involved in fitness. But as the clinic started picking up and we started broadening our market of patients, I realized very quickly that, oh, I need to meet these people where they are. Half of these people have never looked at a food scale, have no idea about portions. Can't fathom 40 pills a day, like all those different details. And we had to really shift. And some of that was, like you brought up, maybe limiting the severity of the protocol, limiting the restrictiveness of the protocol based on symptoms and necessity, I'd say.
yeah,
That's a person to person thing. But another part of that is my verbiage and explanation, making sure that they truly understand what we are doing is temporary And it's kind of like if you broke your foot and the doctor says you can't run for 8 weeks, it doesn't mean you can never run again. It means stop inflammation and injury for 8 weeks. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's kind of the concepts that I always try to push into everyone of like, this is why we're doing this, and it is temporary so that they don't develop a fear of food. We've also, I'm sure you've recognized this too. There's this certain layer of people who are now afraid to train hard, like ever again. Like they think that they can't PR because they'll relapse their gut, and it's like you guys are too hyper focused on individual stressors than like our bucket of stress that our body holds. You know?
Sure. And that's, and that opens up a whole nother aspect of that discussion as to even just helping people understand, like, why do they have these problems in the first place? Because I mean, chances are, I suppose this could be true on occasion, but most people don't have bacterial overgrowth because they're eating McDonald's 3 times a day. Like, that's
No.
even our general population people probably aren't. Now, if that's the case, dude, I'll take that client all day long because I got a lot of runway to work with there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like my favorite, the best client is the one that's obese because they eat too much food. Where are you guys at?
Yeah.
You
Easy.
know,
Yeah.
like come on in,
Yeah.
so uh but that's just not the case with a lot of these individuals. So even even clear down to the point where we have so much work to do on the front end with some of these folks, and it's difficult because now this is where the awareness and the information comes in, because they already think, or they already know, or whatever, that they have this issue, so they're, hey, I want you to do this.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, but you haven't done this, and this. So I mean, we can do it, and you're probably going to get symptom relief. Don't get me wrong.
Of course.
But do you understand that with a lot of these issues, and it doesn't have to be GI, I mean, it can be anything.
Yeah.
The amount of recurrence is
Yes.
ridiculous. Like, it
Yes.
is. There's probably, and I don't have any kind of numbers to back this up. It's just purely observational, but the recurrence rate is probably higher than the long-term success rate. If I were
I would agree. And it has nothing to do with the provider.
no,
Well,
well, it maybe
most of the time.
depending, yeah. Yeah, and because, I'm doing a lot of these. You mentioned me being, third, fourth, fifth in line sometimes, and that does, so it happens less now just because more people know about me,
Yeah.
over time. It happens less, but it still happens a lot.
Yeah.
So they're coming in and they've done 3 protocols already. Like, I had one the other day. I did a consultation. Very nice lady. She had a lot of really bad experiences with a couple of people. I don't know who they were. Doesn't even make any difference to me. It's
Right.
just she said, I have been referred to you at least a half a dozen times. I can't ignore the fact that people keep saying your name. I said, okay, what can I help you with? And she talks to, she's got, I have these GI issues. I have had 3 GI maps. I've gone through multiple protocols. She spent some coin,
Oh yeah.
you know.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's not cheap stuff she's doing. So she comes in and she's like, I don't think I'm mentally in a place where I want to pursue long-term coaching right now. I said, that's understandable. You're burnt out. Cool.
Yeah.
I said, I can do a consult with you. If you have enough information, let's check it out. We'll do a consultation. I do these a lot. And I look at it, and it was a case where she'd run through all these protocols, and her commensal bacteria, there was one commensal bacteria that was still in range. The rest of them were low. One, Matt.
Oh my
I mean, it
goodness.
was tanked,
Oh my
completely
goodness.
tanked. I get her lab work, nutrient deficiencies all over the
Of course.
place, all this
Yeah.
stuff. But she comes to me and she's super apprehensive. She's like, even though I've been referred to you, I have trust issues
Yeah.
now. And I said, hey, I get it. I
Yeah.
totally get it. I said, let me explain. Here's what I see. I mean, to also tell you that this is a very common thing where when you've been put through the ringer like that, you're
Yeah.
gonna have, you're gonna have some hesitations, and that's fine. You don't even have to sign up with me. No hard feelings. I don't take that personally. But I gave her some explanation, so on and so forth. She does end up signing up. Everything went well. Dude, that is literally 75% of these cases where they've had multiple experiences, they don't we're already have one foot out the door because there's the trust barrier alone
Yes. Yes.
is is such an issue. And then I have to be like, well, you're gonna have to spend this much money on all these supplements and blah
Yes.
blah blah blah. So now I have to think like, how can I help this person without them maxing out their credit card
Totally.
and also be mindful of the fact that they're scared to death that they're just going to waste money again. So when you're going out and you're taking classes and learning protocols, you're not even taking into account that like that's the kind of stuff you're going to be running into. You don't know how to handle that.
No.
You're not equipped to handle that type of stuff.
No.
So that's why like in the mentorship, these the more advanced, like the more people that I've worked with longer term, or some of the people that are more advanced that are like in the groups and things that I do, that's the kind of stuff that we're doing 80% of the time is talking about how do we communicate with clients? How do we break these barriers? How do we navigate this? How do we get buy-in? You know,
You mean coaching techniques?
yeah, well, but that isn't that what coaching, I mean, that's really like by definition,
By definition.
you know, on Tuesday, what's today, Sunday. I'm sure this will be done by the time the podcast comes out, but I'm teaching a class on Tuesday and I wanted to do something different that was not, functional health. And literally the whole class it's called the realities of online coaching.
Oh,
And
I love
I'm
that.
I'm
I
literally
wish I could join that class.
yeah, yeah, well, you can if you want. But so literally what I'm talking about is how to just more effective communication strategies, how to understand boundaries better, how to refine your check-in process so you're not like overwhelming people, how to create scalable habits as a coach to where if you have 5 clients, versus 50 clients, like how you need to, and it's just stuff that I never had any, no one ever taught me this stuff.
Me neither.
And
I think it's genius.
I think it'll be super valuable for people. Now it's
They
funny
they
though.
might not know the value, but you
Yeah.
and I know the value.
The funny thing about it was I've a pretty decent turnout, but it's one of the lowest signups. My highest signups were Dutch testing,
Of course.
GI,
Yeah.
of course,
Yeah.
because that's the stuff. Even though you should probably take this
Before that. Yeah.
before you take those.
Yeah. Walk before
And
you can run.
but that's the kind of stuff, that's just where we're at right now. So I find myself on these podcasts and on the, talking to these other coaches and stuff. And more and more and more, this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. I'm like, you're never going to really be reach your full potential as a coach unless you know how to
Yeah.
actually coach
Yeah.
individuals. If you guys want to learn how to be a better coach, start focusing on psychology. You also want to
Yeah.
learn how to be a better coach, learn more about yourself
Yeah.
because we're all biased and we all approach people with a certain bias.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
like I have a very specific personality. A lot of people in our space have very specific personalities,
Yeah.
type A,
Yeah.
all this stuff. But what if your client's not?
Right.
Then what do you do? Do you even know do you even know how to relate to that person and understand their mindset and their needs? You just think they're being resistant to you, but you just don't understand them.
Yeah. You just there's communication blockage. I think that's huge, man. And I think because we are pretty interconnected with the bodybuilding and fitness world, bodybuilding coaches can kind of get away with like, this is how I coach. If you don't like it, go elsewhere. That's like kind of more of a bodybuilding coach mindset of like, you know how I coach. If you don't like it, we're just not going to work out. But if you want to actually provide help and technically healthcare, you cannot have that same approach. And you need to be able to meet people where they are and communicate differently and have more empathy, have more understanding for their personality, your personality, like you said. And I think a good point here is most coaches aren't afraid of growth and evolution, but maybe they're paying attention to the wrong things. Maybe they're focused on, I need to learn about the gut, I need to learn about the endocrine system, I need to learn about this. It's like, well, yeah, but you also just need to learn how to talk to people better and you know and organize your day better so that you're not taking 2 days to respond to people, or you know, this or that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I say all this, and I don't want people to think, I don't want to turn anyone away from mentorship because I got all kinds of cool nuggets that you probably aren't going to find anywhere else. So I'll just plug
Totally.
that in there. But
Yeah.
the but yeah, I mean you're 100% correct, and then unfortunately that's just not one is it's not a very black and white thing, so it's hard to market that. It's hard to be like, hey, my mentorship's different because this.
Yeah.
So like that class, for example,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, that is where our biggest gap in the industry is, in my opinion, currently. And even with bodybuilding to an extent. Now, granted, when we're talking contest prep or something like that, like you just kind of got to shut up and let me do my job.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot. I mean, I can take input to a point, but it's kind of, and you're also cognitively impaired because you're tired and hungry. So like don't
Super emotional.
right. So like I'm not putting that much merit into the everything that you're saying. So
Yeah.
now one thing I think it's really important to point out, because if there's coaches listening, is you said something important there where if you're primarily coaching bodybuilders, you can get away with that one track mind a little bit more.
Yeah.
But from a business aspect, you are leaving a lot of money on the table
100%
because
agree.
you are greatly limiting the amount of different types of people you can work with, and your
Yeah.
turnover rate will absolutely be higher. So people ask me, talk about niching down and all this stuff. And I think there's I think there's certain situations where you probably will just kind of do that organically, maybe. Some
Yeah.
people do, some people don't. But if you are trying to build your business and you think that you because people generally want to work with what they are themselves, right?
Sure.
So
Sure.
like I'm a wellness competitor. So they're like, I want to prep
Well,
females.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then they start doing it and they're like, I hate prepping females. I'm like, well, now now we got a completely 180 off that. And I would say for me, I don't really have a demographic that I like more than
Yeah.
any other. I have a type of person that I might find a
Yeah.
little bit more enjoyable.
Sure.
But I think one of the reasons that my business, because dude, I have zero formal marketing education. I have zero formal business education. I just had to kind of learn a lot of stuff by trial and error and observation.
Sure.
But one of the the only reason outside of just sheer effort and willpower that I got here is the fact that I'm able to service such a massive amount of different people. So if you're a coach, just think about you never would have to turn anyone away that walks through the door.
Yeah.
What would
Yeah.
that do? What would that do? Now, maybe you don't have the knowledge to service someone, so ethically you need to kind of like refer them out.
Sure.
But let's say you're getting a little more advanced and you have the knowledge base. What if you didn't ever run into a situation where you couldn't help someone because they
Yeah,
were out of your scope. Like, what would that do for your business?
totally. Yeah,
What's just the sheer amount of people that you're opening yourself up to is huge. Now that the downside to that is then it gets a little bit harder to market yourself because like
sure.
me, if you go to my, you go to my social media, it's like every post is something way different than the last post.
Yeah.
So and that's because I'm talking to coaches and I'm talking to competitors and I'm talking to moms and I'm talking to whoever. But it's nice to be able to, on any given day, any given person that walks to the door, I have something for them.
Well, and I think that there's, outside of the business aspect, knowing the person you are, just like me, there's gratification in knowing that for the most part, 99% of people could walk through that door and I have something to offer them. I may
Right.
not have the full equation, but I can offer some form of help or at least validation for their symptoms or a new layer of information that possibly wasn't provided to them previously. And there's a level of gratification there, knowing that I can service and help a wide range of people.
Yeah, it's a lot more fulfilling, and that's actually one of the things I talk about in the class. I taught this class. We did a in-person seminar. I think it was in June. So that was what I had taught there. So I'm just offering it online so I can, talk to the online people. But one of the things I talked about is just fulfillment
Yeah,
in the position and how to, because burnout's very, very real. And
totally.
this industry will just coaching will just brutalize you
Yeah,
mentally and emotionally
yeah,
and just beat you into the ground until you just can't stand it anymore. And so that's having fulfillment in what you do. There's a lot of ways to gain that. I mean, success results, just getting results is not the only way that you're going to be fulfilled.
no,
You know, there's plenty of people there's there's been plenty of people over the years where we don't click or we don't end up working out as a client coach relationship or whatever. But when I knew there was a moment when I knew that there was impact and this was fulfilling, is there was a lady that we had a really rough experience with her, but I was very careful we parted ways, but I was very careful in our exit conversation not to belittle her or not to like, do anything like that. She still refers me clients to this day, even though,
wow,
right? So I thought, well, that's interesting. It's like, why does that happen? And
right.
it's because, you were personable, all that stuff, but you you were empathetic to the person, you put in effort, you had I think that people also realize that maybe they're also part of the reason that the relationship wasn't
Yeah,
successful. Maybe
yeah,
not at first, but once they can reflect on that later. Because normally what happens is they'll go to a different coach and they're like, "Oh, wait a minute, that wasn't that bad."
yeah,
And so don't even think, even if you don't have the best results or you don't have things don't go exactly as planned, everyone's still a potential referral system. All these people will reflect on you in some way, shape, or form. And I would say if you've been coaching for more than a couple years or so, and the vast majority of your inquiries aren't referrals, you really need to reevaluate what you're doing.
agreed.
I
No,
mean,
I totally
that's a
agree.
bad sign.
Yeah, because what we're doing when a journey is successful, and we're not even saying 100% successful. You get someone 85% better, that can be life changing for that
Mm.
human being. And that life-changing experience should lead to them wanting to tell their mom, their sister, their neighbor, and that's typically how we get these referrals. They're so excited about feeling better, they have to tell someone else, or they know someone else going through the same thing, and they just can't wait to share.
The I told a coach the other day, we were talking about niching, and we were talking about how they wanted to work with bodybuilders. I said, well, bodybuilders are generally broke,
Yep,
and usually they're the ones who coach hop the most,
yep.
and all these things, whatever. I said, don't underestimate the power of a mom on the school board.
Amen.
She's got a lot of friends, she's got
Yeah,
a lot of connections. I
yeah,
said, don't underestimate the impact that you can make on everyday people and
yeah.
what that will do not only for their lives but for their business. I mean, because really when you're talking about impact, I mean that can mean so many things, but realistically, in my opinion, getting somebody shredded for a contest, that could be a lifelong goal and that could be life changing. That probably isn't quite the same impact as changing the quality of someone's life forever,
Not even close.
in my opinion. Now, maybe there's different levels to that. Maybe if it's like you get this person that IFBB Pro card and they've been competing for 20 years, I would argue that that's probably pretty impactful.
Sure.
But as a whole,
Right.
these things are these things are fleeting, man.
Right. Right.
that's not the stuff. I mean, those aren't the things that are going to change people's lives
Right.
forever.
Right.
It's very transactional. I don't think prep is necessarily transactional, but it's definitely more transactional than, you know, correcting someone's autoimmune disease where they've been breaking out in hives for the last
Yeah.
10 years of their life. I
Yeah.
mean, that's life altering,
Yeah. Changing their adrenal capacity so that they can show up as a mom and a wife.
dude. And there's the cool thing that happens with people is there's always a bunch of indirect benefits that they never expected
Totally.
because they come in for the gut thing, right? Like I got the gut thing, I got this, or I need to get my I
Can't
want to
lose
get my
weight.
yeah, I can't lose weight, I want to get my cycle back,
Yeah.
standard stuff. But then they start going along and they're like, I can play with my kids, or even, dude, the crazy ones are even their like job performance, right? Like there's
Yes.
one,
Yes.
relationships with their spouse even, or
Big
with their
time.
partners,
Big
because
time.
now cognitively they feel better. Their dopamine and serotonin levels are
Yeah.
better and they're actually able to be a better partner in their
Yeah.
relationship.
Their sex
And
drive is higher.
dude, when people tell me stuff like that, after all this time I get amped because I
Yeah.
know I know that maybe they've lost 0 pounds so far. Maybe we're not even to that point yet, but dude, and half the time they say, "Hey, Austin, I want to lose 30 pounds." And I'm looking at them like, well, that's going to be a pretty lofty goal based on all this other stuff that needs to be done. And unfortunately, they probably base that goal on some kind of comparison metric. Like,
Sure.
I was 20 and
Right.
like, well, now you're 50. So,
Right.
first and foremost, or their friend or their social media people that they follow or whatever.
Yeah.
But what happens is they lose 15 pounds instead of 30, but all those other things in their life change. They don't even want to lose 30 pounds anymore.
Right. They're just so happy.
They're like, the 15 is awesome. And the fact that I feel like a person again, but that's not even what they signed up for. They
Right.
didn't even know. And so sometimes, like, again, coaches listening, sometimes that's the kind of stuff maybe that you can talk to your clients about on the front end of those conversations when you're trying to, when they're inquiring with you about refocus on their goals a little bit and talk about what other benefits they may achieve throughout that process, because that's a great way to gain that buy-in, and that could be hormonally or
Yeah, there's so many
whatever.
different wins. You're it's accumulating small wins over a period of time, you know? We don't I mean, there are some people who see drastic changes after like 7 days because their lifestyle and diet was just so bad. But for the most part, it's like chipping away. Like every week or two, we're seeing new feedback of like better energy, better sleep, my skin is clearing up, this or that. I'm more relaxed. Everything you mentioned. So that's something that I always try to do is, and with my coaches too, is teach them like, with the check-in process and the feedback process, let's look at all the possible wins and
Celebrate
not
them.
just what they're focused on of that scale number or something,
Yep.
you know?
Celebrate, celebrate, celebrate,
Yeah,
celebrate. I You have to celebrate everything you can possibly celebrate. You don't, that's not to say that you should ignore the things that still need
work.
addressed,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you have to, it's definitely a perspective, you know, it's definitely like a perspective shift. And but we're all guilty of this. Like when you human nature, there's an article I send people when we start. It talks about automatic negative thoughts and how the brain is basically wired to when you are presented with a situation, human nature is generally to go worst to
Pessimistic.
best.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll evaluate worst first, and then you may hopefully at least get to the good stuff
Wow.
at some point.
Yeah.
Maybe you will, maybe you won't. And
Right.
it just kind of talks about how to rewire that process because one, it's habitual. Two, it's just chemically how we're designed, and we're all guilty of it. I'm guilty of it. It's something I have to practice
Yeah.
on a regular basis. Is if you really if you think about the stuff that maybe you and me, we've got businesses that are doing well. We have hobbies. Do you ever stop and think when you're complaining about the shit, you're like, I am just an ungrateful shit,
I have. Yes.
you know?
Yes.
And I'm like,
I've had to
what?
like recenter my mind because it's like,
Oh
shut up,
man.
dude.
Yeah. So that's kind of it's like
I'm glad you said that because I do feel that something I've been working on. I've I've felt like I've grown a lot in recent years, but there's always more growth to do. And something that I'm still needing to work on with the stress of the various businesses and stuff is like not allowing myself to be so immediately reactive. And it's not reacting outward, it's reacting inward, you know? And I and so it's like it's literally exactly what you're talking about of like the first thought is always negative and I need to like give myself time to get around to the full thought process.
right. So one thing while we still have a little bit of time,
Oh, we're good. Yeah.
was there anything? Yeah, I mean, I can hang for a little bit longer. I'm actually gonna go train after this, so that's
Nice.
fine. So you mentioned since this is a Rise podcast,
Yeah.
was there anything HRT related that you wanted to touch on? I have a
Man,
question for you.
I had so many possible topics that you and I could dive into, but you and I could do a 5 hour podcast. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. I did have a question for you though.
Go for it.
I thought this would be interesting for people to hear is with because this is something that took me a long time to understand. You probably know way more about it than me, but luckily I go to Dr. Eric Serrano is probably I'm
Yes,
sure
absolutely. Yeah.
legend, of course.
Yeah.
So he's been my physician for it's like 13 years. So I just saw him this week. I had an appointment on Friday stuff, which it's weird because I actually get excited to go to the doctor because Eric's awesome. But
Yeah.
anyhow, different topic. So when we're talking about HRT or we're talking about let's say just prescribing in general,
Yeah.
something that people don't understand is I was like this too. I always used to be the type of person where I'm like, doctors suck, doctors, they don't prescribe the right stuff. whatever. But what I realized was after talking to physicians, whether it was Eric or I've had, some physician clients over the years and stuff, is one, insurance has everyone's hands tied.
Hands down.
Two, they're if they're in some kind of like healthcare network in Ohio, we have Ohio Health is the big network. So that's where a lot of the, not all of them, but a lot of the physicians and hospitals and stuff are part of that network.
Yeah.
Hands tied. There's all
Yeah.
these regulations. So
Yeah.
when you go to a physician for, let's say, you have a knee injury,
Mhm.
they have to suggest that you go through physical therapy before your insurance will even clear you to see an orthopedic,
Correct.
right?
There's
Like,
steps.
so, and the same thing can be said about some medications and some
Yes.
practices. Like, you can't get pre-approval or approval for certain medications until you try this first.
XYZ. Yeah.
And also the
Rifaximin is a popular one for that.
correct, right? Because people think physicians won't prescribe rifaximin. Like, no, there's just other things that you would have to do before you got to that step,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that I don't think that physicians are intentionally malicious.
No.
I think that there's two things. One is that they're way too busy, first and
Yes.
foremost, and their schedules are stacked, and
To
there's no way
handle
to
it.
really spend enough time with people, and there's not enough follow up. There's not like enough in the follow up process. So you're already
Agreed.
limited. Two is that they're just doing what they're taught. So if you guys
Exactly.
really want to understand, if you guys really want to understand what that's about, talk about find a doctor, talk to a physician about what their education's actually like and what they're educated in. They're like, well,
Yeah.
they never mention nutrition because they had like 1 2 credit hour class in nutrition for the
That's right.
entire PhD.
That's right.
So it's like they're a lot of these physicians are trying,
Yeah.
they just are so limited. So now we have options, right? We have
Yeah.
like Ryze HRT, for example. Now, I would love to hear your opinion on this. I hope I don't get you fired up too much.
Yeah, you're good.
But the now, of course, with the increase in availability of online clinics,
Yeah.
we're I'm not gonna say it's not the same limitations because you have a lot more ability to do things,
Yeah.
but the vast majority of the clinics really don't have much business doing the things that they're doing as far as from an
100%.
education perspective. So
100%. They're just
now,
taking advantage of an opportunity.
right? So unfortunately, unfortunately, like people ask me, like, I need HRT clinic. I'm like, I have somewhere I can I can send you, and but a lot of these places, man, it's just to the point where they're just drug pushing.
Yeah, they're legal drug dealers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just so frustrated with this process. Luckily, I have you guys, and luckily there are options, but there are very few.
Very limited. Yeah. And I think that's, part of the reason why we've been so successful in just 2 years is because we are offering such a different model to what people are used to with online or even just HRT clinics in general. Everything you said to the T, 100% accurate and agree with. So, you know, we see first and foremost, like you said, physicians know what they know. And who's writing the med school curriculum? Big pharma. So we're set up for failure from the jump. They have to spend $500,000 on an education, and then they're thrown into this system where it's like you get paid to see more people per day. So when do they have time to get further education or to question anything? In fact, they could be penalized for questioning anything. And then there's this whole other concept of malpractice lawsuits. They are so scared to go against the grain And then insurance companies handcuffing them too. That's why no one can get comprehensive blood work. It's not the doctor, it's the insurance companies, you know? And
Yeah,
sometimes there are older doctors who maybe just are stuck in their
sure.
ways. But I think for the most part, they're victims of the same broken system and they don't even know it.
Yeah, and then but there are options, and I kind of tell people it's like if you're going to go the HRT clinic route, think about what's going to happen is there's going to be a prescriber. That could be an NP,
Yep.
that could be an MD, it could be anyone that's able to prescribe.
Yep.
Don't focus as much on that as who you're consulting with and who maybe runs the company and what their background is and their experience level is, because
Yeah.
if you are in fitness or you are a bodybuilder or something, why would you go to a boutique clinic and get your HRT from somebody that offers Botox?
Right.
Why would you, right? Like think about why would you go to you might go to this giant HRT clinic that is just so out of touch with what you are actually experiencing. So that's why I'm glad to have people like you guys, and I'm glad that that option is available because, you have a lot of experience coaching. You have a lot of understanding. I couldn't sit and have this conversation about coaching and nuance and stuff with a lot of these people because you're like owner, investor, silent investor. You just
Right.
have like this person up here that's kind
Right.
of like shilling money into the company or whatever that doesn't have the in the trenches experience because they
Right.
saw an opportunity to make money and then
Yeah.
they just hired some random fucking NP
Right.
whatever to prescribe that doesn't even understand
No knowledge. Yeah.
graphics. So that's just, and again, that's not like any specific question necessarily. It's just something if you guys are looking for those type of services, I think you should really think about that when you're approaching one of these clinics. Like that's very important to
No,
get the
I
correct
100% agree,
service.
and thank you for the kind words. But I feel I I've actually thought about this to myself. Like, I'm not the only fitness coach to get involved in clinics. However, what I've seen is like, okay, you got involved, you're maybe an investor or maybe you are the owner, but you don't have any hands in how that clinic is actually being run. You don't have any discussions with like what 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 scope of treatment are we doing? What reference ranges are we going off of? Or what are we trying to do here? Are we just prescribing for profits, or are we actually trying to meet each patient where they are and provide them what they need? And I think that that is a very niche thing about our clinic is, every single specialist, ironically enough, has been a competitor or at least been involved in fitness, has also had functional health issues and has been through that process. So they very much understand and empathize personally. Um, and then they also have the expanded education, including our PA and medical director. They have explored further education beyond just what Western medicine taught them. And they're trying to stay up with the times. And they're always eager to, if I gather more information, I'm sharing it across the board to all the other people and vice versa. So there's this eagerness to stay on top of the demand of our wide range of patients, and I think that's what's allowed us to provide the service that we've provided. And I think that's obviously important because in the past 5 years, we have seen this big shift away from just trusting your PCP and trusting your general physician, and this desire for more questions, more answers, and getting to the bottom of things, which is what we really try to do at the clinic. Of course, there are those people who every now and then come to us and say, "Look, I just want my thyroid drugs. I don't want to do more testing. I just want to feel better and lose weight." And it takes some time, we're not pushing them, but at the same time, we're trying to provide them knowledge of like, well, these might be some reasons why you're not achieving those goals, and
Yeah.
oftentimes it could be mental health. Something else that I wanted to bring up if we had the time is how much more recently I've been seeing toxic burden affecting people. And I don't know if that's something you see too often, but I've caught 9 cases of Lyme disease just in the past couple months. I've caught in probably 7 cases of mold exposure. Ironically, same people. 7 of the 9 Lyme also had mold. So I'm seeing all these toxic burden cases that, and maybe I'm just more, maybe I'm paying attention to the signs more now. But it just seems to be coming up a lot more recently with people I encounter at the clinic. Some people, it's what we've talked about, the reoccurring GI, and it's like, okay, the GI is not the problem; it's a symptom. There's more going on, you know, and that's where we're finding these deeper burdens.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of that comes down to, I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that they probably have a lot of impairment with their GI, with their liver, and their detox abilities are impaired and stuff. So they're just inherently more susceptible to a lot of these things. Anyhow, it's like I mean, it could be Lyme. I mean, it could really be anything. It's the mold's a great one. So with something like that, I had read a paper, and again, I'm sure you could find a lot, different numbers, but it was something like up to 60, it was 60 or 70% of commercial buildings were found to have mold spores.
Wow.
Now and again, like I don't know what the sample size was on that or
Yeah.
where they sampled it. I'm sure depending on climate, that would
Yeah.
probably maybe make a little difference. There's a lot of things. But the fact of the matter is, my point in saying that is that a lot of us are exposed to a lot of things. And so why does someone else get sick and maybe me not get sick, or maybe you
Yeah.
not get sick, or vice versa? And a lot of that also does come down to our ability to detoxify our immune systems, because these people are so immunocompromised already that anything that they get exposed to is going to be exponentially amplified
Yes.
because of those systems. So that's why we are seeing a lot of this stuff. That's why, like the gal I mentioned with the console, where she had no commensal bacteria, and her sec IgA was literally less than, it's like nothing, it was undetectable. And
Yeah.
white blood cells are like a 1.8
Jesus.
on, stuff like that. You're not going to be able to handle any toxic burden
No.
when presented with it, whatever it is.
Right.
And so that's why that I do agree with you. I think there's a lot more of that out there than people realize. Now, I'm always hesitant with things like that because it's just another rabbit hole when I start. I do work with mold toxicity. I've worked with like mercury poisoning.
Yeah.
I've
Heavy
worked with,
metals.
heavy metals,
Yeah.
lime, all that stuff. First thing is you got to figure out where the exposure is. If we're talking about like mold, for example, and
Totally.
you got to get out of the exposure. But really, you have to fix the system that was unable to handle these things in the first place, because there's people that probably sit in offices all day with mold that don't
They're
really
fine.
have mold toxicity.
Yeah.
But Sally over here gets a migraine every time she goes to the office because she's reactive to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Genetics play into that, of course.
Sure.
Like genetics can play into that. Your methylation and how you methylate, and MTHFR gene mutations. There's like a lot of stuff that can potentially amplify it. But it's these people, it still kind of comes back to the same stuff, is that they're overstressed.
Yes.
They probably haven't pooped in 3 days.
Sure.
You know, they have their liver's not detoxifying, their
Right.
gallbladders, so like all their,
Right.
their lymphatic system is crap. So when we're thinking protocols, we still have to fix all this stuff.
Yeah.
Your body is not going to prioritize removal of toxins when you are on, when you are running around like you're on fire all the time because your stress level is so high. So it's
It's
not that I'm
it's
dismissive of it.
yeah.
It's just that the system is broken.
Yeah. The foundation isn't fortified.
Right. And you do have to now, if the cases are severe enough, there's definitely cases where you need to go in and do it right away.
Yeah.
You need to go in and get rid of the stuff right away. And it's the same thing with meds. It's the same thing with medications. Like people are like, you should never need thyroid medication. You just need to fix your gut and do this and that. So
There's
sometimes
no
that is best
absolute.
case scenario.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes that is, or I get competitors and they're, talking about HRT and this and that. I said, okay, here's my question to you. If we fix your hormones, which we're going to do our best to do, are you going to be able to exactly sustain all the things that we're doing to fix your hormones? Like, no, I'm going to compete again. I'm like, all right. So
Point is moot.
HRT is probably going to be a lot more sustainable solution to that. I mean, I was prescribed testosterone at 20. I was 21. I think, right before I turned 22. I don't know, something in that vicinity. And that's exactly what Serrano told me. He's like, hey, we can maybe get your levels up a little bit based on like XYZ lifestyle factor, but you are going to have to live in a bubble to
Yep.
sustain that result.
Yep.
And you're prolonging something that inevitably is going to happen to you anyhow. And I'd also had speculation, but I'd also had years of weight management sports, so it's just wrestling and cutting weight and, super intense this and
Yeah.
depression and anxiety and like all this stuff. And so he goes, HRT, you're young, but I do think that that is best case scenario for you. And that's why we went that route.
Yeah.
So
It's funny because
sometimes,
I have the exact same conversation oftentimes with women referring to their progesterone. And it's like, look, your body is showing that it's still willing to produce. We're not at an age of true perimenopause yet. So the potential is there. And in the next 6 months, we can most likely revitalize these systems and get you back. But then that question is, what's next? If you plan to go back into prep, hop on Anavar, do those things. If in the next 5 years, you're going to be a competitive pro wellness girl, all this work is just going to right back down and your hormones are going to crash immediately again. And so if that's your thought process for the next 5 years, yeah, HRT makes more sense.
100%. And I'm also bringing this up because I've had a few instances where people have gone to HRT clinics and then they're upset later that they're prescribed something. And or I'll give you, no, that's probably not even a good example. A coach is like, I can't believe such and such clinic prescribed this. Is like, well, you don't know the context for one. And there are absolutely scenarios where that is better than not.
Yeah.
Absolutely scenarios that's better than not. So it's not
Yeah.
that it's any of these functional health coaches that are toting that you shouldn't
Right.
ever have to take hormone replacement medications, whether it be thyroid or whether it be whatever, clearly have no clue
Right.
what is probably going to happen as far as competitive career
Yeah.
moving forward. I'm like, this is not, these people aren't going to live like that.
Yeah.
So,
Which, before we finish up, that we're on this topic and I'd love to bring this up because it's something that I've caught on to lately. Basically my a few of my specialists actually brought this to my attention that recently there's been a trend, or I guess I could say a movement of specific bodybuilding coaches taking their female competitors off of progesterone therapy in prep and knowing how important it is for their metabolic health, their mental health, that balance with estrogen. It's like, why on earth are they doing this? And the only thing I can think of is they're correlating progesterone conversion to cortisol as a bad thing instead of just correlating the stress and the cortisol as the bad thing. And so I haven't spoken to them. I'm kind of speaking for them. I'm assuming they're dropping progesterone thinking that this is going to protect the cortisol, but they're actually hindering the woman's success.
I think there's that because I've definitely heard that rhetoric. And I think there's also they're associating progesterone with, because like during luteal phase in your cycle, it's generally
Water
when you're going to have the
retention.
shift in water retention and
Yeah.
PMS symptoms and all this stuff. But I would argue, I would really argue on the flip side of that and say that maintaining the most stable baseline and homeostasis is probably going to be more predictable, less stress on the body, so on and so forth. And also, this is progesterone replacement. So it is not progesterone enhancement.
Right.
It's like, well, it's like people saying that, I mean, testosterone is a good example. If you are, talking about cardiac health and different things, I'm like, well, if you're just replacing testosterone to a normal endogenous level, you're not at any higher risk of these things than someone that had that level endogenously anyhow.
Yeah, natural is natural.
So progesterone is the same. I mean, it's the same thing. Now, if they're rocking 400 milligrams of progesterone a day and they only
Right.
need 100,
Right.
okay, I'm fine with that. We can just dose. But I mean, I agree with you, and
Well, I
I don't
just
know.
think if that is their thought, if the cortisol conversion is the thought process, shouldn't we just change around the prep sequence to not spike cortisol as much? Like, shouldn't that be the focus and not, oh, just do away with the progesterone? You know what I mean? Like, why don't we give these women less stressful, toxic preps?
Well, that would make too well. I don't. Do I need to answer that?
Yeah,
I don't know.
rhetorical
There's really,
question.
yeah, I don't really think there's much to say. It's, but yeah, I don't. I mean, I don't disagree with you, but that's just kind of a misunderstanding mechanisms because yeah, you're no matter how the hormone gets there, once it's cleaved from the carrier, like once it's a free hormone in the blood, it's not going to act different whether it's endogenous or exogenous. It's the
Right.
same. It's the same
Yeah,
thing.
people are really people miss so much of the forest between the trees oftentimes in our industry, you
Yeah,
know?
I
And
agree.
I really I want to emphasize to the listeners how amazing your mentorship and courses are because that's how we do away with that. That's how we enhance the thinking patterns, the deductive reasoning, and the understanding of the full equation to make better choices, assist our clients better. And I do truly think that, you know, something that you and I think, just have organically before we even had the education and experience we had, we part of our personality was just saying, well, that doesn't really make sense. I want to dive into this further, you know? And
Yeah.
by having that personality, that's why we've been able to become such successful coaches and educated coaches. Whereas if that's not your initial thought process, it's going to be a lot harder for you to get really, really far in this.
Yeah, I agree. You can do well. I mean, you can do fine.
Yeah.
It's just like I had said prior, you're going to be limiting. It's kind of a recap, I guess. You're going to be limiting the amount of people you can work with, the amount of
Yeah.
people that you can help, the demographics you can help, just limiting your impact potential and your business potential, your result potential. So maybe learning how to coach coach, when I say coach, like coach people,
Yeah.
would be something anyone could take away from what message we're trying to put out here is
Yeah.
that's really where, and some people naturally are pretty good at it.
Yeah.
Um, and some people aren't, man. I've worked with some really smart people in mentorship. I'm like, I mean, you can't coach anyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's because they don't even understand it themselves. I was like, well, you probably need to figure out how to do this for yourself before you can do it for anyone else, you
Totally.
know. And
Totally.
maybe you need a coach, or maybe you need some therapy, or maybe you need some
Yeah.
whatever, you
Yeah.
know, because we're one track mind, man. When we're extreme, our bias is normally extreme.
Extreme. Absolutely.
So
All right. Last question. I'm going to let you go. And
cool.
this should be a quick one. Where do you see IMH going in the next couple years? Your coaching team, your brand.
I think in the next couple of years, we so in the last couple of years we've created more diversification and service options as far
Yep.
as I've added another coach and added some different mentorship services like sub services. So really my goal, and I think we're getting close to this, but this especially within the next couple years, is I want this to be a one-stop shop no matter what you guys need. Now that doesn't mean I won't have to outsource, for HRT or for
Sure.
things like that. But I really want this to be a one-stop shop for education, a one-stop shop for coaching. I mean, I
Yeah.
can coach all demographics, but I'm one person.
Of
And
course.
so like
Yeah.
the people that I've been able to add, I'm gonna give them a plug, add on my coaching team are studs. Like
Yeah. No, I agree.
yeah, I mean, they're
Trey's
really good.
awesome. That's awesome. I don't
Yeah.
think I've had a chance to meet some of your newer coaches yet.
We have Aaron Crawford, who specializes a lot in the female side fertility.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, basically anything female functional health, does fantastic job. I mean, Matt Burzgott's got buku contest prep and bodybuilding experience, and he's actually picked up a lot of functional health knowledge
Yeah.
from working with myself and collaborating with the team. Trey's got immense functional health knowledge.
Yeah.
Um, and has a bodybuilding background himself too, so he
Yep.
understands like a lot of that psychology as well.
Yeah.
And so I think that we have really built a coaching. My goal, and I think we're close, is that if I have somebody come in and I need to refer them to one of my coaches, is I never have to worry about anything.
I love
And
that.
that's where we're getting now. With that, it's a little bit harder to get a little bit
Yes, it
harder to
is.
get those coaches on your team,
Yes, it is.
but but I think that's the model that we're creating. And I'm still with the mentorship thing, I'm still learning. I'm still trying to figure out, because it's changing what people want, what people need, as far as not necessarily the education, but the setting. So like trying some different stuff with the groups, trying some different stuff with the classes, trying some different stuff with the one-on-one. But I'm kind of figuring out that and the last thing I'll say is I'm just trying to broaden my reach as far as taking more opportunities to get on different podcasts or bigger productions and doing things like that. Because before, um, I would pass up some opportunities because it was inconvenient for me and my
Sure.
schedule and things. And I'm
I
really
know that
trying to
feeling.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm really trying to. That's something Michelle is gets on me about. She's like, you need to do that. I'm like, God, I know. So that's one that I'm trying to be better at as far as like networking. And so I think that will help us expand the reach into some of those demographics that, or some of those populations that don't know about this stuff yet.
Yeah. Well, I think you guys are doing a great job, like you mentioned, with the changes that have already occurred, the growth that's already occurred, the fact that you're so eager to continue growing and continue improving and stuff is super impressive and just speaks to why you guys are going to continue to be so successful. And just from a more personal note, I think it's great that Michelle pushes you, man. I can just from our limited history together, I feel like I've seen some positive shifts. Just in
She's laughing because she came in here. She came in here to grab something. She's laughing. Let me tell you, she she definitely holds me accountable in a lot of different situations, and I'm super grateful for it because
yeah,
I am an avoidant person in a lot of
yeah,
ways, and she has been helping me immensely with that. And that's why, yes, and that's why I do think that you really, a lot of people think they can do everything themselves. And while you might be able to, you can do it better
yes,
if you have somebody. And thing is, Michelle's not in fitness, dude. She doesn't, that's not her thing at all.
right,
It's just she knows me. And so she calls me on my bullshit.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so I have to swallow my ego a little bit
Yeah.
sometimes. Like, damn, you're right.
I mean, I'm in the exact same boat with Aaron, and I think that's why I notice it for you is just because I've experienced it myself, and it's so nice to have that support system. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You can't think you know everything.
Yeah,
I surely don't. I'm
yeah.
still I'm still learning. I'll
Hey,
probably go I'll probably go listen to this podcast in a year and be like, yeah, I could have said things a lot better. But
well, no, man, it's been a great chat. Like I said, you and I could we need to do like a 24-hour podcast because there's just so many different things, so many different ways we could go about talking about it. But definitely want to have you on again, man. Maybe we'll get to my list of topics next time.
okay.
Uh, but I know you're getting ready for the gym, so I really appreciate you coming on, man. Great chat. I think it was super informative for people to hear, so I'm excited for the episode to come out, and we'll definitely set up an episode too soon.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
All right, my man. Well, I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk soon.
All righty.